I'm sure you've heard people say that AI can't replace humans in product development. And that's true, unless we reactively surrender the ownership of our methods. How do I keep ownership of this method we are doing? We need to get proactive, right? How do we keep ownership, the judgment, the situational awareness, the critical thinking, while being able to benefit from AI? It sure as hell isn't continually repeating, we have ownership. I mean, that's kind of like saying we're customer centric all the time, but then never letting engineers, out to talk to actual customers. So we need to structure the work in a way that maintains our ownership. And that's what the Buckstop framework does. So let's dig in. So I designed the Buckstop to work in structured product development. Right? So if you've got these best practices that you're following, it's for use in those. It's not a process unto itself. It's a framework. It's really tactical. It's meant to be practical. It's meant to be some of their acticals. You just go, you do it, but really looking for an improved outcome. There's 3 operating principles. First, this ownership concept, right? The buck stops here. You own the process. You own the methodology. You own whatever it is that you're working on. Do not surrender that. Another operating principle, bite-sized is right-sized. The smaller and simpler the task that you give to AI, the better the output. The framework identifies some things that might make the task more complex and thereby degrade the quality of what it outputs. The third operating concept is backwards planning. This is always a good thing, but especially in this case, AI is great at going down distracting paths. So have a destination. Know what good looks like before you embark on whatever it is you're doing. So the first dimension in reducing the complexity is where you're deploying the AI. So any method is made up of a series of steps. And are you using it in the step itself of some method, or are you using it on the input, or using it on the output? Because we're going to want to limit the complexity. On any individual prompt, it shouldn't have, an ask for input and an ask for the execution of the step, or input and output. Divide those up across prompts. I'm in the middle of editing the video. As always, I forgot to ask, like, subscribe, share it with others. That it really helps. Thanks. And then the second dimension is what you're actually asking the AI to do. Are you asking it to score something or think about something, organize some materials or pull some materials from somewhere? You want to isolate those as well. So when you're giving it a prompt, don't ask it to think about something and then score it, right? Don't think about it to, pull and then organize. Have it pull the information in one prompt and then in a separate prompt, organize that information. And you can see what these are, right? So score is about evaluating existing material against existing criteria. It's not pulling that stuff. You have these 2 things. Hey, AI, compare, contrast, analyze, whatever, evaluate this thing against this thing. Think is the most open-ended of them. You provide AI with existing material and ask it to analyze it, to think about it, to reason about it in some way. Organize is taking existing material and putting it in some sort of structure. Here's a template, put it in this sort of format. You're not asking it to create any material. You're saying, here is the material, organize it in this way. And then pull is go get the material, right? There's some material out there. I want you to go get it. Now, you're not necessarily going to engage AI for each one of these, right? If you do, it'll generally be in the reverse. The STOP acronym encourages you to plan backwards. You execute forwards, right? But you plan backwards. But again, you might just use it for one of those, or 3 of them, or 2 of those cognitive whats of the AI. It's not a stepped methodology into itself. It's how you can use AI in steps of something else you're doing. So you can think of it as those 2 dimensions just sort of separately, or you can see that if you put those 2 dimensions against each other, they have cells. And each prompt should be confined to one cell. If you find yourself, jumping cells on an individual prompt, break that prompt up, right? This, again, is doing 2 things. One, it's going to improve the quality of the output from whatever model you're using. Even advanced models will benefit from this. The less jumps or assumptions that the AI has to make along the way, the better. But also it makes sure that you're tied into the thinking every step along the way. You have the critical thinking, you own the process and the methodology, and this gives it bite-sized pieces so you can watch that methodology unfold and actively make it happen. And you're not just saying, AI, go do some stuff and come back to me with a result, and I'm not exactly sure what you're going to have done. Then the last thing to consider is the session management, right? So you're giving it a series of prompts that you've broken up across those different cells. At one point in time, though, you just bring it to an entirely different chat session. That goes along with some risks. One, there's context contamination, and there's context fade. And basically, it's how well the knowledge of the conversation information persists within the conversation. In some cases, it over persists, and that's what contamination is. And then sometimes it under persists and just sort of floats away, and that's context fade. To improve the persistence, there are persistence features already built in, right? So a lot of the AI companies realize that persistence is an issue and have started to build these tools. So there's projects on a couple of them. There's GEMS. And they help a lot with the context fading and a little bit with the contamination. But you can also do that on your own by having a separate context file. And that's helpful because you can use it across platforms. It's a good record that you have yourself, and you're not dependent on the AI to maintain the historical knowledge set. You should start a new session if you start to see the performance degrade, right? Because if some of those context issues start, it's a fool's errand to try to revive that chat, at least how models currently are, because once things start to get contaminated or fade, they get all sort of garbled or jumbled or just continue to be contaminated. So that's a good indication to start a new chat. Also, if you're substantially changing the context, right? So you're going from one cell to the far side of the grid, different goals or assumptions, or there's a big change of context, that's really when you should be starting a new session. And that's the buck stop. I'll include a link to the PDF. I've shared it under a Creative Commons license. If you find this useful, share it, with your coworkers, with your manager, with whomever. We can use AI to elevate our game, but falling into reactive mode with AI is a real risk. Because to be honest, a lot of organizations have been doing reactive product development for a long time. They'll come up with a design concept and then spend the rest of the project trying to understand what they created. Anyway, thanks for watching.